Okay, part 2 of this lecture on Ved Mehta. I call it Attachments, Blindness and Infrastructures of Care, the story of Kiltiken. Okay, so the written sample from his autobiography is with you now, and it's called Kiltiken. Well, it's a playful way of calling each other at Oxford during Mehta's generation. So maybe they call each other Kilty with a suffix kin, Vedkin, how are you, Kiltikin, and so on. So that's the name, and Kilty is one of Mehta's person in love, whom he had a romantic love, and that fell out. The excerpt with you is all about how they meet each other and how they fall in love, and then lead to situations where they almost decide to get married, and then there is something that went wrong. A plan for wedding does not take off as much as they plan. So that's roughly the story. But here, I thought I can come with this story because disability in general and blindness too reveal a lot about human intimacy. And that's why it's good to close read this excerpt. And one of the ways in which one can approach intimacy involving disability is to seek recourse to two concepts. One is infrastructures of care, and second, attachment. Let me talk about the infrastructures of care. Caring is what we are. We either give care, take care, and also we involve different institutions of caring. Several cultures do it in different ways. For example, infrastructures of caring include family, friendship, hospital, different learning environments, coupledom, romantic love, and different kinds of friendship. So several societies involve infrastructures of care differently. Why disability should be can be a gestalt to look at infrastructures of care? Because one, different kinds of disability require different infrastructures of caring. For example, person with a wheelchair may include a level playing field where there is proper ramps, toilets are accessible, and then free-flowing, floating facility in the university, meaning going from one place to another. In a recreational environment like dance flow, an open attitude that dancing on wheelchair is as aesthetically appealing and elegant as much as dancing with your legs intact. Okay, so that is the kind of infrastructure I'm talking about. And because disability can speak a lot, and how does it speak a lot about infrastructures? For example, it will talk about infrastructures may connote level playing field. It can connote intimacy where things happen. For example, giving bath to someone because somebody is not able to do it oneself. And that person could be a partner or a paid assistant. Okay. Here, in Mehta's case, he has two notions of a care infrastructure. One is his childhood family in India. Childhood family memory in India is about huge joint family like a banyan tree, all interdependent, noisy, chaotic. And in India, his memory also includes siblings, parents, and competing or different attitudes of his mom and dad. Mom is, in some sense, believes in pre-modern ways of doing things. Take Mehta, the child, Vedi, the child, to the blind child, to magicians, Ayurvedic practitioners, and soothsayers, and so on. His father, who was a medical doctor trained in the Western world, believes in individualism. He wants his son to become a proud cosmopolitan individual who can, crisscross continents and be a person of his own, designer of his own destiny. So these are two competing infrastructures, one the pre-modern and the other cosmopolitan, which he had in India. And the new care infrastructure in America, which he is, exiled into, or he has made a home of his own in such infrastructures as well. And what are those infrastructures? Some of the infrastructures in America is individualism. Well, you need care. One needs care in America like anybody else, but that care comes with the notion of individuality. My right to caring, my negotiations with caring, me as an individual negotiating social contracts that involve caring. All right. So even, for example, going to psychoanalysis for that matter is about an adult sorting out one's problem with a professional. You don't have to reveal that you are going through something bizarre and disastrous to your friends all the time for a vent. You can just go to a shrink, get it done, and which is as legitimate, as unique as the infrastructures of listening and caring available elsewhere, like Vedi's childhood India, where people, it's like a banyan tree of relationships. One is dependent on the other, and there is nothing called private transference and counter-transference happening. So, as a blind individual and a writer, he needs and rightly navigates through this competing infrastructures, one in social life and one in his own self, which involves every atom of his body and mind. Okay, so that's two competing infrastructures. And why blindness should also be a powerful gestalt to understand attachment? For that, I need to explain what is attachment in the first place. Well, as people, we evolve human relationships right from infancy to grave. We are sentimental people. We are a baggage of emotions. But we make a tiny cluster of relationships where on which we depend upon for an infrastructure for our sentiments, emotions, irrational side of ourself, affectations to flourish and make what we are. And that is called attachment. And attachments, for example, could be one's parents, one's other half, a person whom you are in love, and attachments could be one's favorite teacher in a learning sense. Okay, so these two, blindness can reveal a lot when these two systems, attachments and infrastructures of care, are looked through the prism of attachment and infrastructure. Let me illustrate this through this essay. Let me take first the attachment problem. We feel when we become close to somebody, or when there is intimacy between two adults, attachment relationships begin. And when one person feels close to the other and intimate, there are three things one may like to think that they share. One is the self. You include another person in your own self. And how do you get that impression? When you share resources that come with both perspectives and identity. Let me explain. Resources. When two people are together in intimacy, in an intimate relationship, they both assume in various degrees, they are sharing resources. Kiltikin, the reflective piece here, reveal as much, but with a difference. Here, young Ved Mehta, when sharing his inner resources with Kilti, likes to pretend that he can see as much as others, sighted colleagues. If not pretend, he would not at least talk about his blindness to Kilti. Why? Because he himself thinks that blindness is a liability and not a resource. Gosh, that's the beginning of the problem. What is the price he pays? Well, the price he gets is he can present or perform a smarter side of him, share his resourcefulness as a staff writer of the New Yorker for Kilti, project a resource of him that he can walk, talk, perform without a prosthetic, no mobility cane, please. and he is as sexy as anyone. That kind of resourcefulness. So, in some sense, an ability of seeing or an ability beyond typical blind people, the ability and sense of visual normalcy becomes a resource with which he binds, which they bind together, evolve an intimate relationship. For example, in Kiltiken piece, you see that they are playful in talking in Oxonian English. They are talking about the duck pond. They are always talking about colors. They are always talking about, the spectacular world. How much they can insert themselves into the spectacular. So he creates a self in him which is visually resourceful. That's the stuff he gives. Well, you can call it ableism, an idea that ability alone, and ability is the primary material on which anything is based. Without an ability to see, without an ability to walk, without an ability to perform, and all that, you are no one. That's the idea of ableism. An intellectual and emotional investment in the idea of ability. So that becomes a resource for them to bond together. But the problem is, why it fails, Mehta looking at it in 2019, in late 70s and so on, he finds himself quite surprising why he did that and how he did that as a young person. What if he had revealed his blindness fully, say carried a mobility cane and is not too much bothered about bumping into something, revealed himself reading a braille book, or reveal that some things are not, he cannot do, without a fuller investment in the idea of ability. If he had revealed his blindness, two things are possible. One possibility, Mehta himself already said, a lot of women who approached him about intimacy, they when they remind him about his disability, he gets disappointed, and either he moves away from them or they move away from him. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is the theme of blindness becoming an evolving care infrastructure between them. For example, he could give plenty of chances to his intimate partner, Kilty, to take in charge, to change gender roles, to have more practical and immersed descriptive relationship, to expose each other's vulnerability more freely, and to evolve robust bubble, romantic bubble among them by using all the structures of care available in America. So the second did not happen. Mia Mingus calls it access intimacy, a kind of chemistry or intimate relationship based on access requirements, where something becomes, uniquely intimate Right. Another perspective about interesting thing about intimacy when one feels that one is apart from sharing resources is the perspective. When in love, it seems that both, I'm talking about romantic love, heterosexual love, not yet talking about queer love and so on, because I'm specifically talking about a romantic heterosexual love in the writings of Ved Mehta. Okay, uh, uh, sharing a perspective, and the perspective could be about your political point of view, uh, your lifestyle, um, common concerns, and so on, achievement, productivity, and all that. It looks like each other's perspective sounds exactly the same as each other, a transference and a counter-transference relationship. And the third thing people who are intimate share is identity. Well, they together make one identity, two bodies, one soul, that kind of thing. Or they respect each other's identity differences, say racial differences and so on, and see stories, themes, narratives, and desires that bring these two identity in some kind of harmony. It's entirely possible. But here, look at two things that draw Mehta and Kilty apart, like the perspective. For example, her perspective as a model had a perspective about university education. Mehta tries to, say yes when it is safe to say yes, and says no when it is safe to say no, to maintain the relationship in some sense. False performance, and that too does not last long. So now, what am I saying? In evolving an attachment relationship, many gives and takes happen, but when the gives and takes happen on illusory or fantasy based resources, that Mehta is as good as cited. I use good in the sense of performance. Mehta is sighted, Mehta is able to see her with the ocular equipment of the eye, and so on, with the resources created by fantasy, perspectives created by fantasy, and identity formation based on fantasy. It simply empties or drains one's resources inside, and both feel that at some point they something amiss between them is happening. In case of Kilty, the overwhelming character or negative character of patriarchy almost rips her apart. In Mehta's case, giving in to ableism with a fantasy that he is not as much blind, I say it again, as much blind, becomes a drain on his relationship, intimacy relationship. What else we can learn about intimacy and disability in this context? Well, when it comes to using disability as a knowledge resource to understand intimacy, we can jolly well know that disability can reveal, can teach literature on intimacy, can give the following things. The idea of self-revealing, the idea that one should be, frank about care, and one should be give importance to normative consideration as much as individual differences. If there is something universal, if there is one theme that is universal, I would like to call it is vulnerability. Disability as a lens can reveal our vulnerable selves in a dynamic way. And hiding those selves may be important sometimes, but not to oneself. Lastly, before I leave it to your thoughts, disability disclosure to oneself and to others is a political act. Sometimes when I talk to someone on telephone, I don't see the need to reveal my disability. But sometimes I need to do that so that it becomes important that the person is not taken aback by surprise. And also, as I maturely begin to understand my disability with all its limitations and pluses, can be a powerful resource in a relationship. Well, concluding remarks. Kiltikin is a fantastic autobiographical reflection. It is from a male point of view. However, it reveals a lot about vulnerability that gets hidden in a human relationship. We need infrastructures of care differs from system to system. For example, in India, family is still the primary infrastructure of care with all its plus and minuses. In America, it is the robustly built public institutions such as law, education, policing, and many other public institutions are more or less robust and perfect. And they prompt individualism and atomism, introduce those elements in romantic relationships, prompting a couple to disappear into their own bubble. But nevertheless, when disability is a component in both the infrastructures of care, then it reveals some complications and even significance in striking or getting into intimacy, because it gives us unique perspective about sharing of resources, selfhood, and personhood. Thank you.